Welcome to Winning Wednesdays with Pear VC. At Pear, we've been fueling the next generation of tech startups for 10 years. Working closely with founders since the beginning of their journeys, we've seen again and again that a good product isn't enough to build a meaningful business. You must have a winning strategy and go to market as well. We believe that leveraging community, learning from one another, is key to establishing the right winning mindset, frameworks, and strategies.
Enter Winning Wednesdays with Pear VC, a bi-weekly 45-minute webinar series on GTM topics that provides actionable insights to founders and teams building from 0 to 1. Our webinars will have two parts. Part 1 will be 25 minutes of presentations from our guest speakers, the experts here. And part 2 will be a lively Q&A, so prepare your questions. We are your hosts, the Pear GTM team, Pepe Agel and Ana Leiva.
Today, we're thrilled to have Kathleen Estreich from Market One with us. Kathleen is the co-founder of Market One, a VC firm investing in early-stage B2B companies. Market One has a unique value prop in that it specializes in providing hands-on marketing help to its portfolio companies. Before getting into VC, Kathleen ran marketing orgs at companies like Facebook, Box, Intercom, and Scalar. Now Kathleen spends her time on the ground with early founders and thus has a wealth of experience and insights to share today. We invite you to turn on your cameras and engage with reactions as Kathleen shares her presentation. After her remarks, please participate actively in our Q&A. Kathleen, we're so excited to have you here today, and without further ado, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much for the kind introduction. I'm so excited to be here. So let me just pull up my slides. And I see a few friendly faces. So I'll just do so excited to see folks that I know. Rose specifically is one of our portfolio founders as well. So we co-invested in Sudozi with Pear. So super excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of what Pear does, and always excited to talk to founders specifically about marketing, which is what I do most days, all the time. So like Anna said, we're going to go through some content and then would love to spend a lot of time answering your questions. I know marketing is one of those things that everyone has a different definition. So hopefully you'll come out of today's talk with some frameworks and templates that you can use as you think about building your marketing strategy really for 0 to 1. So without further ado, here we go. So we're going to cover 5 key marketing principles here. The first is around building your own playbook. Second is around how to focus on impact over activity. The balance of fuel and engine. I saw some of the comments. A lot of you have read our newsletters, so we'll dive in a bit more on some of our favorite frameworks here around fuel and engine. How to think about building your marketing org, and then how to hire your first marketer, which some of you may be ready for depending on your stage. I think the most important thing, though, for founders to think about is, like, you are the first marketer at your company, whether you want to be or not. So better to want to be and learn kind of how to do this well, because if you did a pitch deck or if you did your first website, that is early marketing for a startup. And so really thinking through kind of embracing it and enjoying it, I think will help you succeed as a startup. So the first mistake we see startups make when they're building their marketing team is trying to copy another company's playbook. So you might be sitting in a board meeting, and VCs are very guilty of this. I saw this when I was operating. That's like, oh, well, this company tried this. My other portfolio company tried this. You should try this. Or you, like, the founders or someone at the team, like, read a blog post about how one company scaled, or listened to a podcast, or saw a company that's like 10 times your size and what they were doing. They're like, we should do this. And you're like, okay, well, there's a lot of nuance there of why it worked for them. And so I think a big mistake is often like just trying to copy someone else's playbook or what they're doing, because they're at a different stage. They have a different potentially go to market. They have different strengths within their business. So you can look to people for inspiration, but I think trying to copy someone else's playbook, specifically on marketing, just doesn't work and is a failing strategy. So rather than using someone else's playbook, use your own frameworks or the frameworks that we provide here instead of playbooks. And playbooks is it's a nuanced way and maybe semantic, but one of my biggest red flags when I meet marketers, so we'll talk about hiring marketers later, but if they're like, oh, I'll just bring my playbook from my company and like I have a great marketing playbook, I'm like, ooh, well, what worked there might not work here. And so I think that's just something to be aware of. And what worked at your previous company probably won't work for you because it's a different business, different go-to-market. So how do you create your own strategy and marketing strategy? So I think there's 3 pillars of your marketing strategy or 3 inputs into your marketing strategy. The first is around product marketing and really understanding your audience. Who are you selling to? What do they care about? Who are the other players in the ecosystem? This is really how you're going to get to your positioning and where you fit in the market. This is understanding not just where your product fits, but like what is the day-to-day of this audience that you're trying to sell into. The second input into your marketing strategy is your go-to-market motion or your business model. So are you selling into big enterprises where the sales cycles are several months? It's like a top-down sales motion. Are you a PLG inbound driven motion? Is it some hybrid motion of these two? Like, what is the go-to-market motion? Because your marketing strategy is going to be pretty different depending on what your go-to-market motion is. So I think you really need to understand that. You might be early days and have some hypothesis there. And so I think part of building your marketing strategy is like getting some clarity around like, okay, we think that we're going to be sort of a top-down sale. And like your ACV is a big driver of this because you can't have a several month sales cycle if your ACV is $3,000 or something. It just doesn't, the math doesn't make sense. So that's part of it. And then the third thing, which is kind of a Market One framework that we've created and kind of the basis for our fund, are these marketing advantages. So there's 3 types of marketing advantages. There's product advantages, there's market sort of ecosystem advantages, and there's like marketing advantages. And so to build an effective marketing strategy that's going to play to your strengths and help you win in your market, you really need to do the work on each of these 3 drivers to then put together your marketing strategy. So I want to spend a little bit of time on marketing advantages because I think this is something that's pretty unique to the way we view like successful marketing. So each company hopefully has like 1 to 3 of these marketing advantages. And I think particularly when you're going from 0 to 1, where you don't have a ton of resources on the go-to-market side, it might just be you as the founder, maybe one kind of generalist go-to-market person, figure out what your advantages are and exploit them to grow faster. So these could be things like a network effect. Like if you have a network effect in your product, make sure your marketing strategy is like doubling down on that. If you have like an interesting wedge into a larger market, like double down on that. If you have an interesting channel or partnership strategy, build your marketing strategy around that. If you are a founder who has like such credibility in your market, already have an audience with who you're trying to sell to, exploit that and spend a lot of time on that. Usually company, like if you don't have a marketing advantage, I go back to the drawing board and figure out how you can get one because you won't win without one. If you have one, make sure that you understand what it is and build your marketing strategy around this because it's going to help you grow faster. It's hard enough to build a business, but if you're not playing your strengths here, I think it's 10 times harder. And so when we evaluate companies that we're going to invest in, we look for companies that have a marketing advantage. Part of what we do with them is help them identify it and then help them build a strategy that exploits that marketing advantage to grow faster. So I think that these are just some examples of late stage public companies that have marketing advantages. And you kind of think about, oh yeah, this is what helped them grow faster. But I think for you, if you take away one thing from today, it's like, what is my marketing advantage and how can I build a strategy to exploit that? The next principle is really focusing on impact over activity. We like to call this random acts of marketing. But the big mistake a lot of companies make is trying to do kind of everything without it being a cohesive strategy. So, oh, we're going to try this thing over here, this thing over here. Another way that I describe this is like the peanut butter strategy. We're just trying to like spread it all over the bread, but like nothing is really, you're not really doubling down on anything. There's no cohesive plan or goals. And you're just kind of doing a bunch of random things. You will not win that way. It's stressful to like, as a marketer, to hear a bunch of ideas. Because if you're trying to do too many things at like 10%, you're going to get 0% impact on that. And so really focusing on the impact over the random acts of marketing, I think is really important. So part of this is really understanding, where are we focusing? You cannot do everything. You're a startup. You have a small team. You have limited resources. So figure out the things that you're actually trying to do and double down there. So if you're in your current market, there's kind of 4 key ways that you can grow. One is expanding into new markets. So what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to expand into new markets? Are you trying to capture more of the same market, whether it's through growing market share where you are, capturing more, or like land and expand, increasing conversion rates. So when you add a customer, like or when you build your top of funnel, are you trying to increase conversion rates through that? Or are you trying to get more out of your current customers? I think it's really hard to do all 4 of these things at once. And so another thing that you should really understand is like, where's our focus today? Are we, most of you are probably trying to get new customers, but some of you, as you gain traction there, might be trying to get new customers, expand a current, get more out of your current customers, and then figuring out when you want to go into new markets. So figure out which one of these you're trying to do and build your strategy around that. Because if you try and do all 4 at once, again, you'll fail because you just don't have the time and resources to do all 4 of these things well. Another thing that's really important when you think about building your marketing strategy is to have 4 sets of goals. The number of times I meet founders who are like, I'm like, what are your marketing goals? Well, I just need more top of funnel, or I need more MQLs. And it's like, well, okay, that's one goal. But it's not everything, because marketing needs to be more holistic than that. If you're only focused on top of funnel, then you're going to grow linearly because you're not planting enough seeds to experiment, or you're not building a strong enough foundation. So you really should have 4 types of goals within marketing. KPI goals, and then not just focusing on top of like the top line number, but also thinking about conversion rates within that, because you could grow your top of funnel 5x, but if it's a leaky bucket that you're putting everything into, it's not going to convert and it's not going to have impact. So making sure that you are doing both volume plus conversion when you set KPI goals for you or your team, I think is really important. The next set of goals is around projects or campaigns, like tied to specific things. So this could be a big product launch. It could be a new website project, like migrating the website. It could be a big campaign that you're running, but those are kind of longer term things where you want to make sure that you're capturing that as part of your goals. The experimental goals are super important because you're early stage. You're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. If you don't allow room for experimentation to test what could be the next step change growth levers, then you're kind of missing out. And again, we'll continue to just grow linearly. And the last types of goals are really around like the ops side. So this is kind of behind the scenes, like getting like HubSpot implemented or hiring your first marketer. Those are goals that you also need to capture because they take time. And so making sure that, you kind of have all of these types of goals and not just the KPI types of goals will make sure that you're building a cohesive marketing strategy. And then the other thing that's important to have a high impact marketing team and strategy, and you can do this as a founder if you are leading marketing right now. Before doing any work on the marketing side, like if you're creating a piece of content or driving an initiative, use the GACS framework. This is so helpful to make sure that you're actually clear on what you're doing. Start with the goal. Why are we doing this? If you cannot answer why you're doing something, you should go back to the drawing board and figure out why. The second is, who are you targeting? So what segmentation, what stage of the funnel, like who are we trying to reach? And if you're not clear there, you should be clear, because if you're trying to target everyone and everything in every stage, the initiative is not going to do well because it's not high impact. The next is, what is the unique point of view? How is this adding value? Like, what is the creative? Like, if you don't have a unique take here, if any company could create this piece of content or you know, have the same message, then it's not unique enough. So the question is, why are you doing it? So you need to, this is actually one of the more important things as part of this framework, is really understanding what is our unique take and unique point of view for why we are the ones saying this. And I see this a lot with startups where they create a bunch of content, but none of it is actually that interesting, and that stuff doesn't do well. Then the channel. So what is the distribution for something? Because you're going to create something different depending on how you're distributing it. So if you're creating like a LinkedIn post that's different than like a landing page on the website, or a blog post, or a podcast, or a no-code tool, like understanding how you're distributing this content is going to inform. You should understand that before you ever create it, because if you don't have a plan for that, then again, why are you creating it? And then understanding who are the stakeholders, who else needs to sign off on this, other teams, other folks who have skin in the game, and making sure you get their buy-in early so that you can move faster in the end. So for any marketing initiative that you're doing, if you want to build the highest impact marketing org or just strategy, it's super, super important to do this work up front. Doesn't take that long. And once you get in the habit of it, then you'll make sure that everything you're doing on the marketing side is focused on the impact that you're actually trying to drive. And I think that is like the one thing that I see universally across startups that are starting to build out their marketing strategy and team, is they're trying to do everything and they're not sure why. But I think starting with this framework for everything that you do will provide that clarity of the impact that you're trying to have. Okay, so a lot of you have read our newsletters, and we talk a lot about fuel and engine. So the big mistake, and this is actually the conversation I have with a lot of founders who are like, marketing's not working, or I'm hiring my first marketer, which I think about. And my first question is, do you think you have a fuel problem or an engine problem? So what are fuel and engine? So if marketing were a car, fuel would be like positioning, messaging, story, content. And the engine is like distribution, channels, ops, like analytics side of things. So a lot of times when marketing doesn't feel like it's working, you have either a fuel or an engine problem, or wrong fuel, wrong engine. So what do I mean by that? You need to get the balance right. So if you have a lot of content, but no one is seeing that content, you have a lot of fuel and no engine. So you probably need to create less things, but figure out how to distribute the things that you already have and what are the channels that are going to work. If you are getting a lot of eyeballs on content and the channels seem to be working, but nothing is converting, you probably have a good engine, but the wrong fuel or no fuel to go into that engine. And so oftentimes, actually, when I talk to companies, they're like, oh, we just need a growth marketer. And I'm like, okay, do you have all the content that you need? Or are you confident in like the positioning, messaging, story, understanding of who you're trying to target? And you just need to like go execute on that. And oftentimes they're like, oh, no. So then the answer is maybe you need both fuel and engine here when you're starting out. So I think that's an important thing. You also want to make sure that the fuel is matching the engine. So you don't want to be a Tesla in a gas station where, you know, you have fuel, but it's not going into the right channels. And so you want to create this feedback loop, like learning what works from the fuel, the story, the content, distributing that out, and then getting feedback, and then kind of optimizing around these things. But you need to have both sides of this when you think about marketing. You also need to map your fuel and engine of like where things are in the funnel and the conversion rates through that. So like not all content, like I mentioned earlier, is meant to be for each part of the funnel. Understanding like this is top of funnel, this is mid funnel, this is bottom of the funnel, and making sure that you've mapped out the fuel and engine that you have for each of these stages is super important to make sure that, you know, it's like highly efficient. The other thing that's super important to understand is your positioning, like knowing your story and who you're telling it to. So what type of product are you? What is the problem that you solve? How would you describe your solution? Who is it for? And why is it better? The number of times I go onto websites, and I just gave this feedback to a company last week where I was like, I do not know what you do. And I don't know who it's for. And I think in this kind of goes back to like, don't try and do what like later stage companies, a lot of people look at Stripe and they're like, oh, the Stripe website's awesome. Everyone knows who Stripe is, so they can do more creative things there. They don't have to tell you who they are, who they're for. But US startups, you actually have to tell people because no one's heard of you. And so really understanding like these elements and then reflecting that in your marketing is so important. And I think clear over clever is your friend here, and really understanding this stuff. Because again, if it's not clear, like, are you replacing a product? Are you 10x better? Are you a different take? Are you a vertical solution? And like who that problem is for, why it's better, and like really understanding the audience that you're trying to attract is so important. And then once you get your fuel and engine working together, you do that through running campaigns. And so campaigns are kind of they're like bigger marketing initiatives that bring the fuel and the engine together to do something more impactful. And when it says involves all areas of marketing, it could be one person doing all of this. Usually it is when you're the first marketer or the founder, but really thinking about like, how do I build bigger marketing campaigns where you're aligning on, you know, the audience, the unique take, the creative, all of these things sort of come together in bigger campaigns that you're executing against. One other principle is around how marketing orgs are not sales orgs. So a big mistake I see is founders trying to run marketing like sales. Marketing is much more full funnel. They're focused on short and long term, not just like, what are we going to hit this quarter? But how are we planting seeds so we hit our number in 6 months, in 12 months? And marketing really communicates one to many. Sales is very optimized around one-to-one communication. I think within sales, there are far less roles. In marketing, it's so interdisciplinary. There are all sorts of functions within marketing. And so one thing to think about as you start to think about building your marketing team, it's more akin to a product team than a sales team. Because there are many sub-functions within marketing. So there's like 20 different roles within marketing. On the kind of 3 big buckets of marketing are growth marketing, product marketing, and content marketing. And then within each of them, as you get bigger, you start to get more specialists within each of these roles. And so I think it's just really important. One of the first newsletters we wrote was actually just a marketing org chart, because most founders don't come from a marketing background and don't quite understand like that there are so many sub-functions within marketing, and often think of it like, oh, within sales, there's an AE, there's an SDR, there's maybe a sales engineer, and maybe management layers. But within marketing, there's, you know, like I said, like 20 different, you know, potential roles that you can hire for. And that's what makes it hard to hire on the initial side of marketing. And so how do you hire your first marketer? This pie hopefully makes you hungry for wanting to hire that first marketer. So I think one of the big mistakes that companies make when they're hiring their first marketing leader is finding someone who's only done one sub-function within marketing. If they can't find someone who's both strategic and scrappy, they either hire too junior where they can't set strategy, or they hire someone too senior and they don't know how to like roll up their sleeves and actually do the work anymore. If they're coming from a very large company, I was just talking to a marketer about this yesterday. marketers at large companies own a very slim, deep part of marketing, but they don't touch the rest of it because the teams are so big. And so hiring someone from a very large company makes a lot of sense on like the engineering side and potentially other functions. But on marketing, having startup experience or growth experience is actually super important. And then if they only spike in one area, instead of having breadth and depth. And so the way to solve for this is to hire a pie-shaped marketer, which means that they have breadth across all parts of marketing and depth in the areas that you need. So there are different flavors of pie-shaped marketers. There's kind of hard to find and then extremely hard to find. But they do exist, and the market's excellent right now for hiring on the marketing side. It's in the 3.5 years, almost 4 years I've been doing Market One. This is the best time for startups to be hiring marketers. There's excellent people on the market. So don't be discouraged by this being hard to find to extremely hard to find. But one flavor of this is like product content people. Product growth is sort of the most common that we see, and then content growth. And then if you can find someone who's touched all three, who still wants to join an early stage startup, hire them because they're very, very hard to find. And so when you think about like what you need based on your fuel and engine, if you need someone who spikes on fuel, oftentimes your first marketer is like a product content person. If you need someone who spikes on engine, usually you want a growth product pie-shaped marketer. And so I think it's just like identifying where are the big gaps, where are your strengths as a founder. If you are really good on like the fuel side, then maybe you need more of an engine person to complement you. So looking for that growth product person can be a good first hire when you're ready. And then the roles and experience differ depending on the go-to-market motion. I think this is also something that's really important. Like I mentioned at the beginning, one of the inputs into your marketing strategy is identifying your go-to-market motion. The marketers that you hire on your team are going to be different depending on what that is. And I think go-to-market motion experience is far more important than domain expertise. What I mean by that is if you have a top-down sales model, you need marketers who have worked in a top-down sales model, because your marketers are going to be more used to working with sales. If you have a self-serve go-to-market motion, you need marketers who are used to self-serve motions because they're going to be more used to working with product teams. And so I think that's actually pretty important. Like it just differs. The role and the function differs depending on your go-to-market motion. So I would make sure that you know what your go-to-market motion is, or have a hypothesis or strong opinions around what you think it will be, and hire marketers who have experience in that, because the job of marketing is so different depending on your go-to-market motion. And so I just went through a ton of stuff here. We have a ton of newsletters and frameworks for all of these things that as you start, so hopefully my goal here was to give you the top line things that you need. And then when you're ready, or you're like, oh, I'm starting to think about how we're going to grow, or setting my marketing strategy, or, doing my positioning, we have a bunch of content and templates and frameworks built out for this stuff. So, go to our newsletter and take a look. But it's early stage marketing is hard, but I think the biggest thing you should think about is like, what is our strategy that is unique to us that's going to help us win, and then going and executing against that versus trying to do everything that everyone else is doing. So it's an exciting time, and think about your website as sort of the front door into your company. And so I would think about using that as sort of the window to launch your marketing strategy. And from there, figure out where you can have the biggest impact based on your positioning, messaging, and audience analysis, the go-to-market motion, and the marketing advantages. And if you had like one takeaway from this is go figure out your marketing advantages, because those are the things that are going to help you grow faster as a business, and orient the whole company around that. So I'm happy to take questions. I know there were some that were submitted ahead of time, but if there are live ones too, happy to do that.
Yes, thank you so much, Kathleen. Oh my goodness, so much high value in what you just shared. It'll take time to digest, but I've already gotten founders sending me notes saying like, wow, that was incredibly high value. So thank you. We do have some questions that have been submitted, but very much want to take questions from the audience. So please raise your hand, pop in your questions. We have about 15 more minutes, so we want to try to cover as many as possible. And we will start with a few that were submitted. One thing that just stood out from what you're saying, Kathleen, is it's really hard to find marketers, and founders have to be their first marketer, and you want to focus and so kind of become a pie-shaped marketer, right? With broad sort of exposure, but depth where it makes sense in that focus. So such good takeaways already, but we'd love to hear a little bit about AI. I think everyone's talking about AI. That was one of the questions that was submitted. How can our founders who are already so spread thin, really, limited resources, how can they leverage AI to help them with this? Again, marketing can be so overwhelming. You just showed us all of the different scopes and specialties within marketing. How is this a special time to be doing founder-led marketing? Tell us, give us some hope.
I think marketing, this is like the best time to be doing marketing. You can do so much more with less. There's a lot of tools out there. I think it can be a little bit overwhelming of how many tools are out there. And so part of what we're trying to do, we hosted an AI showcase in December to highlight some AI tools for marketers. We're doing another one in a couple of weeks because I think there is a lot out there. But the way that I would think about it is from a founder is like anything that you're doing manually can likely be automated. And it won't be like 100%, but it'll be like 60 or 70%. The other thing that I've started asking actually in interviews that I do with candidates for our portfolio companies is asking marketers, what's your favorite new tool that you've been using? Don't hire a marketer who's not using at least one AI tool in their workflows, because marketing is changing so quickly and you want people who are thinking about how can I do my job more efficiently? Or what tools can I leverage here? Even if they're like, I'm using ChatGPT to like do the first draft of my blog post, like great, at least they have an answer. But if they don't have any answer there of how they're using it in their day-to-day, I think that's a big red flag. There's a lot of stuff. So I think there's stuff on like content creation. I think there's stuff on like workflows. Outbounding is changing a ton right now. Like my prediction is in a few years, we don't even have SDRs because a lot of that's going to be done by a growth marketer using a lot of personalization tools. Like Clay is awesome. We're like pretty obsessed with that right now. But I think there's a ton of tools out there. So I would be hesitant to hire people who aren't using them on the go-to-market side because they're like changing the way that people are doing things. My biggest thing is I think that actually makes you need more generalists than specialists, particularly on marketing, who can hire a tool or fractional or specialist for the things that they need. But the in-house people are going to have to be far more generalist who are actually starting to think about like what AI tools can I use here? Because I see like 10 a week. Like it feels like on the MarTech and go-to-market side, there's a lot of noise out there too. But I think part of it is like experimenting and seeing what's going to work for you. But I think the outbounding, personalization, and content creation are kind of three areas where I think about what tools you can use there.
Yeah, love that.
The personalization stuff is cool. Like and the other thing that's cool is like the no-code tools where, if you wanted to do like a sample app or like marketers wanted to build a no-code tool to demonstrate, value of the product, like marketers can do that on their own now, whereas you used to need like product and engineering resources. So I think there's just a ton of marketers are a lot more self-sufficient. So you want to hire people who are excited about this next wave of go-to-market where, there are a lot of tools out there that you can use to do your job better or do more creative things.
Yeah, that's incredible. Awesome. Okay, we got a question about the difference between project campaign goals and experiment goals. And I would just add to that, I think early days, and back me up here, founders, everything can feel experimental, right? It's like we don't yet know really what works or even figuring out where you have that advantage. So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on project campaign goals and experiment goals, the difference there, and then different KPIs to measure success in either of those buckets.
Yeah, I think the project campaign goals, those are like a product launch. Like we're launching this big feature or this product. Experimental is like, test 3 new channels for distribution, or test 1 channel. Like you might not have time to test 3 channels. So like test LinkedIn as a channel for the next month, looking at like conversion. So I think it's more, it's the test is the project versus the like KPI goal, which is like, grow blog visitors 5% month over month or whatever. That's something that you already know. Whereas the projects are longer term usually, and maybe have some KPIs, but harder. Like it's more like get this product launch out the door type of thing, probably in the early days. And then experimental is like run this experiment is the goal, because you don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah. I love what you said about not wanting to kind of just use a playbook. Like, give me your playbook, or let me copy what someone else did and worked. We have a question here about picking the thing that is most impactful, or like doubling down. And the question says, I know most people use the cost impact confidence framework often, but what I found challenging is that impact and confidence are pretty subjective and hard to measure. Can you share some examples of how you double down and pick the tactic to focus on?
I think sometimes you can start small and like test something if you're not sure. So that's where like the experimental thing could turn into a big bet. But it's like, rather than doing like a benchmark study for like how, finance leaders are doing, are like thinking about their spend, you could do, okay, we're going to do like a short, survey of our customers and like test that of like, is there appetite for this, to then double down and invest on like a bigger benchmark piece of content. And so that's where I think like, if you're not sure and you have a hypothesis, that's where the experimental goals can help you test things that you think can be step function growth drivers, but you're not sure, then like do a smaller version of that to get more signal to then tell you, oh yeah, we're getting pulled here. This is great. Or, ooh, this was a miss. And so glad we didn't spend more time. One of the things I like to it's like the impact, and like how much impact do you think something can have, and how much resourcing will it take, like time impact. Like if something is like a huge commitment and you think it's going to have a small impact, don't do it. But if it's potentially a really big impact but a huge time commitment, maybe do a smaller version to make sure that it's going to have the impact that you think. But if it's low effort, high impact, do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Engage the commitment based on the conviction that you're getting from these little experiments along the way.
So I think the experiments are a good way to help you figure out, like, we have this hypothesis that this could be a big growth driver. Like, how do we test that before we put all of our eggs in that basket?
Yeah, love that. Somebody had submitted a question on, and please, folks who are on, keep submitting your questions. You can raise your hand if you want to take the stage and ask your question live as well. But a prior submitted question was about leveraging in-person events and how to sell specifically into marketing teams. So having been head of so many marketing orgs, would love your take on this, how to sell specifically to marketers, and then your thoughts on events today.
Yeah, I think that it's like selling to any audience, like figure out where they are and where they hang out. And marketers hang out on LinkedIn. So I think but if you look, like a lot of stuff is happening on LinkedIn for marketers specifically. We used to do a lot of stuff on Twitter, and marketers don't hang out there as much. Like now we basically exclusively do stuff on LinkedIn because our audience is marketers in a lot of ways too. And I think in-person events, I've been thinking a lot about in-person events actually post-COVID. And I think in-person events can be really effective if that's where your audience hangs out. But I think they can also be a total waste of money and time and resources. And so like anything, you have to figure out, like, how do you make that, like, how do you figure out if they're actually going to be ROI positive? I think if you're attending events, I think it depends on your audience. Like, and before you go commit to any event, like make sure it's where your audience hangs out. And I think like sponsoring a booth is really expensive. And so before you do that, maybe you go and like attend the conference, see if it really is your target audience, maybe host a dinner as part of that. So I'm actually a big fan of like companies hosting their own events versus trying to go to a bunch of conferences that are really big and the ROI is not always there. The other thing that you need to think about with conferences or events that you're going to or sponsoring, there's a lot of work pre-event and there's a lot of work post-event. So it's not just going to the event. Like, how are you sourcing people and setting up meetings ahead of time? And then what's your follow-up strategy? And if you don't have the team to do that, you're not going to get ROI from the events. And so I think you have to be ready to commit to the event and the post-event follow up and strategy there before you're ready to kind of spend the money. I think there's like for me personally, I've been to a handful of conferences in the last year and a half, 2 years. And one thing that I've been thinking about is like, if you're hosting an event or conference, like what are you trying to optimize for? Because now you can do events like this where you can capture like the content side of things is almost better online, because then you have the asset as something that you can repurpose from a marketing perspective. So what can you capture in person that you cannot capture via a webinar or a virtual event? And those are the conversations and like high quality attendees and building connection. And so that's another thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is like, what do events in the post-COVID world look like? Because I think it's changing. And I think that's an opportunity for people who can bring high caliber people together in their own way. So, but again, it all goes back to, are events an effective strategy? Does your audience go to events? And if they do, great, like figure that out. But if they don't, and they actually like, there's much more effective channels to reach them, then don't go heavy on events.
Yeah. Bottom line, do what your market is telling you to do, right? Follow the cues
figure out,
of the audience.
Figure out your audience. And the other thing is like, if one of your marketing advantages is founder market fit, then get your founder, like, so Rose, that's Sadosi's marketing advantage. So Rose should go and like keynote at events, not just like go and have a booth. And so use that as your advantage to then like meet people if CFOs hang out there. So I think that's part of it too, is like, if you can speak at an event or you can host a dinner at an event, that's a lot better ROI from my experience going to a ton of events and planning events. That I think you can get higher ROI if you do more than just like a booth and don't do anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're expensive and time consuming.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much more to chat about. I think we're at time, guys. I can't believe it. That flew by, but was incredibly high value, Kathleen. I am so grateful for your time. I wanted to share a few final thoughts. We do have a final question for you, Kathleen. That's a question that we'll ask every guest on our Winning Wednesdays webinar series. And it's about what you think is a secret recipe to maintaining a winning mindset and driving momentum in the face of challenges. You know what early founders are up against. So what is your maybe final piece of advice on maintaining that winning mindset?
I think there's two things. One is I think continuing to have a growth mindset. It's like you're going and doing, like, if you don't have a growth mindset, you will not continue to grow. And then the second is bias towards action. I mean, from my experience, like the faster a company moves and just like makes decisions and like moves things forward, especially the early stages, instead of kind of overthinking things, I think that'll help you get more data to then like make the right decisions. Because every day, you're kind of wasting time if you're not kind of moving the ball forward. And so I think moving quickly, that was, I guess I grew up in my career at Facebook, and the whole move fast and break things. The move fast and break things worked really well there. I think you have to figure out what things you can break. But I think the reason that Facebook was such an effective company is because we moved so fast. And I think that's something that I've taken with me in every company, is like bias towards action and just moving quickly. And I think the best founders have that growth mindset where they're like open-minded, but also driving things forward, but also are able to just like move, like don't wait a day, just do it now. And kind of don't wait for things and really just move fast.
I love that. That is just gold. And I co-sign 100%. So before we leave, guys, I want to remind you that this is a bi-weekly webinar series, and Kathleen actually knows our next guest, who is Kelly Schur. I'm trying to, hopefully you guys can see my screen. Can you see this? In 2 weeks, we'll have Kelly Schur on this webinar series. She has so much experience and works closely with teams in their sales development early on. So can't wait for her to share all her insights. But Kathleen, any thoughts on why our audience should come back for that session with Kelly?
Yeah, I've known Kelly for a while now because we work together at Box and Intercom, and I think she's amazing. I send founders her way all the time. And so, yeah, especially if you were thinking about like founder-led sales and intro to building your sales org, kind of like what we did for marketing today, I think Kelly's amazing. So I might try and attend as well and hear what she has to say.
Not to be missed. Awesome. Guys, if you haven't already, a few people have been writing in that they've already subscribed to your newsletter just during this call. If you haven't, go subscribe to Market One's newsletter. It is phenomenal and very high value. Please join me in thanking Kathleen for being our inaugural guest for this webinar series. We're so grateful for your time. And we're recording this. We're hoping to distribute all the awesome takeaways as well. So look out for that. And let us know how we might improve our webinar series. We'd love to hear from you, founders, peer community, on the types of topics you'd want to hear. We always are mindful of trying to provide the most actionable content. So hope you got a taste of that today, and excited to see you every other Wednesday for Winning Wednesdays with Pear VC. Hope you're a step closer to winning today because of your time with us. So thanks for joining us, guys. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.